So the last thing we need to talk about is how the two sets of numbers, the f-stop and the shutter speed, the relationship that we have, right? Yesterday we talked about how we can figure out what setting to put f-stop and shutter speed at based on the light meter. The last thing I want to talk about is how they relate to each other. So I'm going to just ask you for a minute to write down one of our examples from yesterday. Yesterday when we did the experiment with taking a meter reading on a white subject inside, we'll just use this example for now. Some of you on one side of the room told me that when you were pointing the camera and taking a reading of the sketchbook as your white object, that you had a setting of f22 and a shutter speed of 15. And then I said, well, tell me another extreme. Tell me a different extreme of f-stop that somebody had. And somebody said, well, if I have my f-stop at 4, I can get my shutter speed up to 125. Do you guys remember that? Little bobbleheads? I need that every once in a while, little bobblehead. And what I said to you yesterday was both of these settings have enough light coming into the camera to take the picture. But each of these settings will give you a different type of picture. In the first one, are you going to have a high depth of field based on that high f-stop number? Yes. Emily says yes. Will I need a tripod though? Eric says yes. I will need a tripod. I didn't have one. So this picture is going to be blurry because my hand is going to shake potentially. And even though I have a high depth of field, this is going to be blurry. On this one, am I going to have a high or a low depth of field? Caitlin? Low, because I have a low f-stop number. But I don't need a tripod. These are the same lighting, but I'm going to get different images. Let's look at how these numbers changed. I want everybody looking at the board for a minute. If you remember, when we were first talking about f-stop and shutter speed, I gave you a sequence of numbers, right? You guys remember? And I said that every time you switch, if I go from f22 to f16, I'm doubling my light. Do you remember that? Tell me, because I'll review it if you don't remember that. So with the f-stops, I'll just go to there for now. We drew this, and I said every time you changed an f-stop, you doubled the amount of light if you're lowering them, or you cut it in half. Remember now? And then with the shutter speed, it's approximately the same thing. This is double the light. Are we good? Did I lose you? I know, numbers are rough. We're okay? These both have the same amount of light, but here's what I want you to look at. If I'm bringing this number down, if my f-stop is lowering, my shutter speed has to increase to get the same amount of light. Let's look at these numbers again. If my f-stop number gets lower, my shutter speed number has to get higher to have the same amount of light come into the camera. This is super important to understand. The law of reciprocity is an inverse relationship. me see if I want you to write this next. Hang on a second. Okay. So you can write this. Once you get the correct exposure in your light meter, you look at the settings and you make a decision. If you look at those settings and you decide like, oh, my f-stop is too low, I've got to change it. It's an inverse relationship. You're going to have to change both numbers. And if you're making one number lower, you've got to make the other one higher to keep the same amount of light coming into your camera. I'll repeat that because that's a lot. Once you've established that you have enough light coming into your camera, if you make one number lower to change the way the image looks, you have to make the other one higher to keep the amount of light the same in your camera. Can I keep going? You don't have to write law of reciprocity. You already have that down up top. It's an inverse relationship. I do want you to write this green down. It's an inverse relationship. Good. When we go outside to start shooting, I'm going to give you guys a preset for starting. So if we go outside, for example, on a day like today and it's sunny out, I'm going to give you a starting point because I don't want you to be overwhelmed like, oh my gosh, where do I even begin to choose my f-stop and shutter speed? I'm going to start you out and I'm going to say, okay, I want everybody to set their cameras to f16 and a shutter speed of 125. And then take a meter reading of your subject. If it's too light or too dark, you're going to start changing one of your controls, and either f-stop or shutter speed, and that's where we're going to start tomorrow. Okay, that's where we're going to start tomorrow. Questions? All right, that is that.